In the early 1940s, World War II was raging across the world. Nazi Germany occupied Poland and France and bombed Britain. On the Eastern Front, he is fighting deep inside the Soviet Union. In Asia and the Pacific, Japan, an ally of Germany, was advancing. The world was truly sliding into darkness. In 1942, the Soviets halted the Germans at Stalingrad in one of the bloodiest battles in history. In North Africa, the Allies pushed back German and Italian forces. The Americans defeated the Japanese Navy at Midway, and in 1944, the Allies landed in Normandy. A year later, Berlin was surrounded, Hitler committed suicide, and Germany surrendered. But, and here's the troubling part, it really wouldn't have taken much. If Germany had conquered Moscow, if the US hadn't entered the war, if Germany had not attacked the Soviet Union, if Hitler had listened to his generals, what would life in Germany be like? If they won, the Holocaust would never have ended. The Nazi regime systematically murdered around 6 million European Jews. These were not just numbers on paper, they were people, families, children, neighbors, entire communities that have vanished from the maps forever. In just one camp, Auschwitz, more than 1 million people perished. In Treblinka, nearly 900,000 people. In Belzec, 500,000, and those were just a few of the dozens of camps and thousands of masses. If Germany had won, terrible things would have begun to happen. The so-called Ost Plan, to expel, enslave, and exterminate tens of millions of Slavs in Eastern Europe. Estimates of this plan suggested the displacement or death of 30 to 50 million people. Science might have advanced, but without any ethics. The Nazis are infamous for their cruel experiments on humans. There was a program called Action T4, under which tens of thousands of people with disabilities were murdered and sterilized. In concentration camps, horrific experiments were carried out on prisoners. The experiments were conducted by various German doctors, the most notorious of whom was Joseph Mengele, also known as the Angel of Death. When trains full of prisoners arrived, Mengele stood on the ramp and with a wave of his hand decided the fate of thousands of people. To the left meant death in the gas chambers. To the right, temporary survival through forced labor. He reportedly did this with a calm, almost cheerful expression, a whistle between his lips, elegantly dressed in a spotless uniform. He was all the more terrifying to the prisoners because he came across as refined and friendly, especially toward children, whom he would give candy only to send them off to be used in experiments. When he spotted the twins on the ramp, he immediately separated them and sent them to a special wing. He measured every millimeter of their bodies and compared the differences. He injected chemicals into their eyes, trying to turn their eyes blue. He performed blood transfusions between twins with different blood types. He deliberately infected them with diseases, typhus, tuberculosis, to see if they would get sick in the same way. If the regime had survived, people like this and practices like these might have become a common part of science. Technology would not serve people, it would serve power. Think of the W2 rocket, the world's first ballistic missile. It wasn't created to take us into space. It was created to bomb cities. The economy of the Third Reich always had only one real driving force: armaments. Krupp, Rheinmetall, Messerschmitt, Heinkel. These names would become synonymous with the entire economy. Even after victory, Because a Reich that dominates an entire continent, it must also control that continent. And for that, it needs weapons. Lots of weapons. Millions of soldiers deployed from the Atlantic to the Urals. Tanks patrolling the streets of Warsaw, Kiev, and Moscow. Hitler dreamed of a new Berlin. He called it Germania, a world capital, unlike anything the world had ever seen. His architect, Albert Speer, designed buildings that will take your breath away. The Volkshalle, the People's Hall, was designed to accommodate 170,000 people under a dome 16 times larger than St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Wide boulevards lined with monumental buildings. All of that requires steel, concrete, stone, and above all, labor. And that labor wouldn't come willingly. Millions of slaves from Eastern Europe would build this megalomaniacal vision with their bare hands. The construction industry would become one of the empire's largest sectors, driven not by wages, but by the whip. In the newly conquered empire, there would be no freedom, not even for the Germans. People were encouraged to denounce their colleagues, friends, and even family members. All media would be subject to the Ministry of Propaganda, headed by Joseph Goebbels. There would be no private, independent, or critical media. Every article, news report, or radio broadcast would have to conform to the regime's official line. The newspapers would be full of praise for Hitler and the Aryan race, propaganda about the superiority of the German nation, reports on the regime's achievements, and the building of the 1,000-year Reich. Any information about the regime's crimes, concentration camps, mass murders would be completely suppressed or distorted. Journalists who deviated from the official line would face imprisonment or death. Foreign media would be banned in the occupied territories. Access to information from around the world would be virtually impossible. The regime would not have left the church alone. It had its own plans for them. The Nazis would not have banned Christianity outright. Most Germans were Christians, and they could not afford an open attack. Instead, they would have gradually subjugated it and remade it in their own image. A movement of so-called German Christians would emerge, uniting the church with Nazi ideology. It would remove the Jewish origins from the Old Testament, portray Jesus as an Aryan, and place loyalty to the nation above loyalty to God. Religions such as Buddhism and Hinduism would likely not exist on German territory. The lesson is simple. Freedom is fragile. Peace is not guaranteed. And history can repeat itself the moment we stop paying attention. The world has never seen Hitler triumph, but that is precisely why we should never stop asking what would have happened if he had. Because only by remembering the past can we protect the future.